In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Praise be Jesus Christ and his most precious blood. This is Matthew Tiberton from Reformed and Catholic, and this short video will present a primer to a Trinitarian understanding of time. Dr. James B. Jordan, in a 66-page booklet called Crisis Opportunity of the Christian Future, originally published in 1994, synthesized the thought of Eugen Rosenstock QC and the Reconstructionists to articulate a Trinitarian understanding of time. The necessity and benefit of a Trinitarian understanding of time are threefold. First, many contemporary secular philosophers and historians present a flawed understanding of cyclical time by extrapolating the conflict framework of Hegel and Marx. This Hegelian dialectic is an interpretive method whereby a proposition or thesis and its antithesis are resolved to create a synthesis, which is a higher level of truth. Although this framework presupposes that there is no objective standard to identify this higher level of truth, which is the synthesis. Thus, every development then becomes blinded progress. Secondly, Christians must understand time and history to be Trinitarian because it is created by God and thus a creature. All creatures, by virtue of God making it and by analogy of being, participate in some likeness to God and things held together within the divine intellect. To reiterate, all created things reflect or reveal God in some way or function or the things of faith. Thus, all water anagogically points to how God is and possesses the true water of baptism. All doors analogically point to Christ who is the true portal, John 10:7, and all letters symbolize the reality that Christ is the true word and alphabet, John 1:1 and Revelation 1:8. Thus, time being made by God is also impressed with the reality of a triune God. Thirdly, by knowing the zeitgeist of the age or time, we can provide the proper Christian solution. Sacred Scripture describes in 1 Chronicles 12:32 the men of Issachar were, men who had an understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. Knowing the times allows us to know what to do. Furthermore, God has patterned time in such a way for his bride the church to be able to read it, to adequately respond to the time to progress history towards the culmination of it in the glorious eschaton. Cumulatively, the church must understand the time to usher in the actions that will put all of Christ's enemies underneath his feet. Psalm 110:1. Time is Trinitarian primarily. History occurs within subsequent cycles of ages of a Father, ages of a Son, and ages of the Spirit. Ages of a Father loosely deal with creation, foundations, developing proper worship, and sins against the or a Father. Civically, this age deals with temples and tribes. Ages of a Son deal with sins against the Son and its Christological types, and brother-brother relationships. Civically, this age deals with creating societies and setting nation states. We must remember that kings are also called the sons of God. Finally, ages of the Spirit relate to sins against the Spirit, including prophecy and misdealings with other people, such as the intermarriage throughout the biblical narrative. Civically, this age of the Spirit also deals with empires and the world. This Trinitarian cycle is fractal in Scripture, and here are 4 examples. Genesis 1 through 3 involves the creation, foundation, and worship in the garden, and Adam sins against God the Father. In Genesis 4, Cain slays Abel, a Christ type, in his moment of fratricide, and ultimately another son/high priest is born, Seth. Genesis 6 describes God's punishment of his spirit not dwelling among men, in verse 3, as a consequence of the abominable intermarriage between the sons of God and the daughters of men. The patristics also describe this pattern. Abraham is known for building altars wherever he goes, and as a father, offers to sacrifice his own son Isaac. Jacob sins and rivals his brother Esau, and they both create their own nations. Finally, Joseph acts as a prophet before the world, acting within the empire of Egypt. The 3 historical periods can also be broken, according to the Old Testament, into Mosaic, Davidic, and exilic periods. The Pentateuch and Mosaic periods deal with creation, foundation, and the development of proper worship to Yahweh. The Davidic period involves the creation of Israel as a nation-state, and the subsequent division between Israel and Judah as a brother-brother type, and kings are described as sons of God as described above. Finally, the exilic periods deal with mingling and idolatry through the intermarrying or harlotry between Israel and the nations. The prophets preach against the mingling with the nations, and the exilic period deals with salvific history on a global or imperial scale. Finally, the Bible as a whole can be seen as a revelation of the Father in the Old Testament, the revealing of the Son in the Gospels, and the work of the Spirit in the epistles and letters. Thus, this triad is not only Father, Son, and Spirit, but also tribe, nation, and state, and can also be broken into priest, king, and prophet. We can also see this pattern outside of the biblical narrative and can see it in the church in the world. The early church primarily was about the development and foundation of true worship. It is called the patristic age. Ecclesiastically, the church is divided according to culture and geography. It's tribal. The medieval period begins the division between the two brothers of East and West and involves the formation of city-states. Finally, the spread of denominationalism and globalism can be described as an empire where Christendom prophesies to its own empires and the unreached peoples. Theologically, the patristic age predominantly develops a right understanding of the Trinity and the consubstantial and co-eternality between the three persons. Within the medieval age is developed civil theology, and much of Christology in the 13th century is systematically developed. Finally, post-Reformation pneumatology grows as discussions of the nature of regeneration and the work of the Spirit begin. Finally, within the world, the development of history has been from tribes or isolated cultural groups to civil nation-states to finally the age of globalism and empires we find today. To conclude this primer, we must understand where we are at now. Time does not only move in cycles, but it repeats in cycles. Many Christians articulate that we are coming to the end of the age. That is correct. We are coming to the end of the age and are at the horizon of a new age. We are leaving the ashes of a global society and reforming towards the intimacy of our tribal communes. The global zeitgeist has caused us to forget our neighbors, and within the church, caused us to commune with those far away from us. For a while, we must leave our focus on our imperial denominations, cathedrals, and global economies and reform to a tribal age. Christ's bride has grown in beauty by the Spirit, although it's neglected the reality that God is a father, that is, masculine and he. Jim Jordan points out that we've developed through a full cycle of the life of the church, and we're now reforming towards the tribes again. The world has already begun its progression with its obsession with neo-paganism, people's inabilities to communicate with those most immediate to them, and its tribal tendency towards insulated cliques. So also must Holy Mother Church reform to the tribal model it has always meant to maintain at its foundation. As tribal people united under Christ, we must share supervision and fraternity within the household of God. We must joyfully sing and dance the psalms and hymns of Scripture, expressing the entire color palette of human emotion through the words our Lord has taught us. Finally, we must invite everyone to our festive banquet. As a tribe, we must invite stragglers to a table and nourish our children for the work they will pick up. Time is Trinitarian. It moves from Father, Son, and Spirit. Each age comes with death and resurrection. While the world is in turmoil at the death of the age, we are men of Issachar and know the times. Even greater, we are Christ's and are awaiting our resurrection.